Hey, welcome to Stay Tuned with Mikey and Chad. I'm Mikey.
I'm Chad.
And today we're talking college football, man. First college football weekend of the year. So we're pretty excited about that. We got Tony Donahue coming on the show. Chad, what did you think about this last weekend?
Man, there's a lot to talk about. I think there was some highs, there was lows, in-state wise.
Yeah.
We'll get into it.
Yeah.
Not real happy with one of our teams.
So stay tuned, and we will be right back. All right, so Tony Donahue.
I saw the recording of the Jerry Springer show one time.
Were you were there?
Yeah.
How was that?
So this is like 2008, and I had a friend of mine, and she was like, "Hey, I got 2 extra tickets to go see." I think it was like Labor Day weekend or fall break of like 2007. And a friend of mine had interest in Chicago, so we went, and we were like first in line, so we could be like right there, center stage, and it was like gender bender blowout. So all these people get drawn. And I got to ask a question at the end, but it was funny because they bring you into this room in downtown Chicago, and it's just like this. It looks like a lunch. It looks like a classroom, basically.
Yeah.
And they walk you through like when to yell Jerry and not to cuss, so I don't have to beat things out, and like pretty much it's the rules. Then they file you out into the studio where it's recorded, and literally it's like tiny. It looks big on TV, but it's tiny.
Mm-hmm.
And Jerry walks out and says a few jokes, greets the audience, and then they actually taped 2 different episodes that day, and we sat there both. So, yeah, it was actually where that friend of mine that invited me, and then the friend that I invited, that's the first time that they ever met, and they're still together to this day. They've been together for like 11 or 12
Look
years.
at you, Mr. Matchmaker.
That they met each other on Jerry Springer, and people always say, "On?" And I say, "Oh, no. Like, we went Jerry Springer and something."
Right, yeah. Hey, I've got a bone to pick with you, dude.
Okay,
I texted you yesterday. I said, Saturday. I said, hey, I've got an extra spot in my fantasy league. You said I can only do 3 a year. And now today I saw on Twitter, it might be a little stalkerish, but I saw you responding to David Deering that, hey, I'm going to start one. What the fuck, man?
Yeah, we're gonna start a 3-1 just between a few guys that I know that have been doing a few for a while. So I try to limit myself on how much money I put into that stuff, because I know myself that I don't take it that seriously, and I know by like week 8 I'll probably be checked out. So I had a buddy that wanted to do a free one, and I said, all right, I'll put something together, and we'll go from there. So
well,
I'm not a big fantasy guy. I like doing the Survivor stuff, or just, I don't know.
I get that. Like, I was fairly. I mean, mine's a $50 buy-in, so I get it's fine, whatever. Yeah. I got another guy.
I'm on the $50 buy-in, and that's already a little bit too much for me.
Whatever, man. You're big money. What are you talking about? So,
I wish.
So I want to talk college football this past weekend. What the fuck happened? First off, with IU.
Well, I mean, I think the day started off pretty bad for them when that dude's jersey was misspelled, and I think that was what you saw more than anything. From that loss, the IU expectations, whether it's basketball or football, are always probably way too high. And when you start, these teams aren't starting, against Eastern Kentucky anymore. There's
right.
Austin Peay's not coming to town. They're taking on Iowa. Big Ten matchup right off the bat. Did I expect IU to win that game? No, I expected to get absolutely throttled like they did. I thought it'd be like a 21-17 game, 21-14 type game. They were out of that from the get-go. And, you got to hit reset. I mean, Penix did not look good. The defense obviously looked atrocious. And I think this is the first, I've heard it on the radio, I've read about it, I've seen it on Twitter. I mean, IU fans were so stoked for this college football
yes.
to start. They had aspirations to maybe make it to the Big Ten championship game here in Indy, if not at least another solid bowl or a major, maybe even a New Year's Day bowl. But to get off the snide like that and absolutely look flat, disinterested, and 2 or 3 steps behind an Iowa team that's pretty good. Obviously, they're ranked 17th, and they'll get a big test coming up this weekend against Iowa State. But with IU, man, I mean, it's just the expectation level that they'll never live up to, and getting throttled like that was disappointing to say the least. I think for everybody down in Bloomington.
Yeah, I watched the game. Penix just looked. He did not look like he did last year.
He looked scared to death.
Maybe it was the injury, maybe it was whatever. But I mean, he looked so scared, and he held on to the ball so long, and he just could not find an open receiver. It was horrible to watch. I mean, it was bad. I thought, like you said, I thought maybe they might lose by. I figured they might lose maybe by 3 or 7, but for them to be ranked, what were they ranked? 17th or 18th. That's way. They're not even going to be in the rankings in the top 25 next week. I guarantee that. I mean, they just
you look at their schedule. Okay, you've got Idaho coming to town, right? Okay, big deal. But Cincinnati is tough. I mean, Cincinnati's a top 10 team. Cincinnati is a team that will come to Bloomington and if IU doesn't play an A+ game, Cincinnati will take advantage and knock their socks off. Then you get obviously like a Western Kentucky, but I mean, Penn State, we saw what they did. Michigan State got a good win against Northwestern. Then you get Ohio State. Maryland won over the weekend. I mean, when you talk about look at the schedule and what we know, and I know it's only after week 1, and it's probably, you always overreact in situations like that. Yeah. And then you underreact. If they were to go out and win, maybe your expectations are back to being too high. But Indiana's got to watch out. I mean, this is not an easy schedule, and Cincinnati will come in 2 weeks and absolutely boat race them if they play like they did on Saturday.
Yeah, I was watching got to watch the majority of the game in between a few things that I had to take care of. But one thing I noticed is Freifel. He on paper it looks like he had a great game, but he just couldn't get separation. When he did, he was able to get the ball. Penix was able to deliver a strike, but he was supposed to be that possession receiver with the deep threat ability. He didn't help Penix at all in what I see.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I mean, I was always predicated on their defense, which I thought played really well. But for IU to not even score double digits in this high-powered offense, like this is all we've heard, like this offense can score, and this is going to be, this is the team to take them back to a major bowl game, and right now it simply isn't. Now, again, it's week 1, and things do happen, and it's hard to simulate any kind of, game action in a practice. You know what you're not good at right now if you're IU, and you know what you need to improve on immensely. So we'll see if they can take that stride into the weekend when they play Idaho, which I think should be – Idaho's a decent school, but there's no way that Idaho should be able to come in here and win. Then you hit reset and you get Cincinnati, and if you can beat Cincinnati, who's number 8 in the country right now, maybe number 10 in some pools, it kind of nullifies that loss to Iowa. So you got to beat Cincinnati, and then you're going to have to go and get a big win, whether it's a Penn State. I don't think they're going to touch Ohio State, but maybe a Michigan. You got to go out and get that big win as well in Big Ten play.
Yeah. So I'm really partial to IU, not only because I went there, but now a guy that went to my high school, Charlie Spiegel, as a running back for them. He got redshirted last year, and he's on the squad this year. But I saw him in high school. He had over 10,000 rushing yards in high school. He broke the state record for touchdowns. It's like, why don't you put this guy in? And I get that he's only a sophomore, but it frustrates the hell out of me that they're not putting him in. But Tom Allen's got he's got his game plan, and they're running back. They're not getting any room to run at all.
Yeah, and you take this Idaho game coming up, and you kind of look at it and say, let's break it up into 2 halves. Okay, let's try these guys in the first half, our starters from last week at Iowa, see how they do. Let's hopefully they build a lead of 21 plus points or more and rotate some of these other guys in to give them a chance. Because what they did on Saturday simply didn't work. And that's against probably, the third or fourth best team in the Big Ten. I mean, Iowa's a good team. I wouldn't say that they're
not the best, but they're good. Yeah.
But again, at least you know exactly where you are when it comes to after week one. And there's only one way to go from here, and that's up for IU.
Yeah. One thing that scares me, you brought up the Cincinnati game, is what that Desmond Ridder quarterback from Cincinnati did. That kid looked incredible. He looked like a potential Heisman finalist. I know it was just Miami of Ohio, but 49 points, 300 yards.
I wouldn't say Heisman finalist, but he looked good.
400 yards, or 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. He did have the interception. But if they play anything, if their defense is anything like it was against Iowa, that kid he's gonna put up career numbers. And there's nothing we're going to be able to do to stop him.
And you look at Cincinnati, I mean, they're a team that they're not, quote unquote, even though they're ranked in the top 10, they're not playing like cookie cutters. IU's on the schedule, Notre Dame's on the schedule, and then you can only play your conference schedule, right? But there's teams like Tulane, SMU that are pretty good as well in that conference. So this is a Cincinnati team that's going to be looking and saying, all right, if we want to be in consideration for that New Year's Six Bowl, that automatic bid that usually one team gets a year that is a non-power team. Cincinnati's looking to steal that bid to go to, let's say, a Fiesta Bowl or going to an Orange Bowl. And they're going to look at those games with Notre Dame and IU and say, all right, if we can win one of these two, we've got a legitimate chance to that bid. And, I mean, I wouldn't say must win for both teams, but Iowa, it's a top 10 team. And if IU can get that win, that looks good on your resume. And if Cincinnati can go to IU, play a Big Ten school that is projected to go to a lot of bowls, then all of a sudden, they're thinking we got to win this game because it's going to get the automatic qualifier.
Yeah. Hey, sorry about that. We had a little audio glitch, but we're back. And where were we at? We were talking about which team we're talking about?
About Cincinnati and coming,
IU,
getting together against IU, and then they got Notre Dame later on in the schedule, and that could be one of those teams. If they can get one of those two games, Cincinnati's looking for a big bowl game.
Yeah, I mean, and they're looking for a New Year's Six game as far as a team that would come out of a non-Power 5 type conference. I mean, look, as we know, the Pac-12 is not going to impress anybody. UCLA had a good win against LSU, but I think that was more so the fact that just LSU is not as good as what their preseason. I mean, there's nothing more of a bigger time waster than breaking down preseason rankings from college football. I really don't even pay attention to them until probably week 4. Get these teams to get out there, play some games, get tested a little bit, then see where they stand. Then you kind of get a good, you really get a good sense of where this team is and where the ranking is. Having Indiana ranked in the top 25 wasn't right. Maybe Cincinnati at number 8 is too far up the boards. We don't know. We won't know. A lot of it's just based off of last year and projections coming up in the first couple of weeks this year. So I like Cincy, but again, just to wrap that up, I mean, IU's going to have their hands full when they come to town.
Yeah. So we'll go to Purdue. Okay. Oregon State is a shitty team in the Pac-12, and they barely beat them. What do you see Purdue doing the rest of the season? Are they going to be ranked? Are they going to be anywhere close to being ranked? I mean, what's going on with them?
Well, I go back to Saturday night's game, and I factor in a few things. Rain. It was just nasty weather, as we know. You really don't know what you're going to get out of that Oregon State team, who played well last year, but also gave up a shit ton of points in a lot of their games. I think the over hit 7 of their 9 games last year. The under hit, it was kind of a defensive struggle there. The second quarter, things really started to slow down. Both teams kind of got off to a good start, but then in the second quarter, it really slowed down. And, I'll just say this about Purdue. Despite the fact that Oregon State isn't the best team in the world, Purdue had an answer. Every time Oregon State, scored or got a stop, Purdue answered. And we've seen Purdue teams in the past where, they panic, especially in the fourth quarter. So I give them full credit for closing this one out. I give them full credit for getting the victory, doing what you're supposed to do. And then you go from there. You get a week off, and then all of a sudden you got Notre Dame, which is going to be hungry. Notre Dame gets Toledo this weekend, but then then they welcome in Purdue in 2 weeks. Minnesota's a pretty good team. I mean, despite the fact that Minnesota lost on Thursday night 45-31 to Ohio State, I mean, they still played them pretty damn well, had a lead at one point.
Yeah. That was a lot closer game than the final score gave credit.
Yeah. This Purdue schedule, man, is flipping brutal.
Yeah.
Right? It brutal. You get Notre Dame, followed by Minnesota, Wisconsin, who will be ranked, Michigan State, Northwestern, who's supposed to be a bowl-bound team, IU, obviously, at the end of the year. Yeah. This is a tough schedule for Purdue. And, as much as Boilermaker fans are going to want them to go 6-6 to at least make a bowl, or 7-5, I mean, if I'm Purdue with this team and Plummer the way he's throwing, 7-5 going to, I don't know, let's call it the Quick Lane Bowl, I don't think that's a disappointment schedule and how it sets up and how you're fortunate enough to get Wisconsin and Minnesota at home, but still, I mean, that's a brutal Big Ten schedule.
Yeah.
I think the one bright spot on Purdue is Bell. That kid's shown, the last couple of years he actually can play the game, and he's going to be somebody that could slide up a lot of teams' draft boards at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I called a few of his games in high school. When you think about a guy that is a go-to for Jake Plummer, I mean, is a good guy. 8 catches, 134 yards. I thought Payne Durham had a pretty good game as well with the 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Jackson Anthrop is clearly that guy that is a go-to, across the middle in the slot to get a couple yards. Decent running attack. I thought the defense played good. I just thought it was probably a C+, B- effort for Purdue, but nonetheless you're 1-0. And yeah, David Bell's a guy that can certainly make a lot of money on Sundays.
Yeah, he's the game breaker type of guy. He's got that game breaker speed. He's got really good hands. And he can play about anywhere on the field that you need him to play.
Yep.
So let's talk about, God, should that Notre Dame game last night, should that have been as close as it was? I mean, that was a nail-biter.
I don't want to say, like, taking your foot off the throttle, right? But I felt like Notre Dame got comfortable.
Yeah.
I felt like, 31 or 21 points in the third quarter. And I think it was, 38-20 at one point?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then 18 unanswered for Florida State in the fourth quarter. I'm a Notre Dame guy, right? Notre Dame fan. Not the biggest Brian Kelly fan. I never have been.
He wants all of his players executed, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, probably not the best way to go at it.
Not the best choice of words.
There's always going to be a level of unknown when you go to a place like Florida State that's always a rowdy crowd. First game after Bobby Bowden's passing a few weeks ago. A win's a win, but Notre Dame giving up 18 unanswered in the fourth, you've got to learn how to close. You got to be able to close some of these games out. I mean, Toledo next week for Notre Dame is not a bad team.
Yeah.
Then you get teams like Cincinnati, Wisconsin, North Carolina that are ranked. Notre Dame's going to have to learn how to play with the lead and learn how to close out football games, or they'll find themselves 6-6 getting invited to the Pinstripe Bowl.
Right, and that's another thing you just mentioned. A win's a win, but in FBS, is it really a win? Because a lot of what they judge your rankings on is how much you win by.
Uh-huh.
And barely beating Florida State, is that going to hinder their FBS standings, come a few weeks from now?
Well, you look at Notre Dame, probably one of the only teams in the country, even though they quote-unquote are playing an ACC schedule, right? You literally, if you're Notre Dame, you have to blow these teams out, because you're going to get a team like Alabama or Georgia. Let's just say Alabama and Georgia, right? Probably going to be 2 teams that'll be ranked in the top 5 the entire year, battling for a national championship. Alabama and Georgia are going to play teams like Auburn, LSU, and they're probably going to blow their doors off and not take their foot off the throttle, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be a quote unquote 55-14 type games, right?
Yeah.
Then you're going to get teams like Vanderbilt, who aren't very good. Tennessee football, not very good right now. Ole Miss, meh, right? So they're playing schools that and then they're going to say, well, should Notre Dame be in the conversation when they only beat Florida State in overtime by 3?
Right.
And if State goes to a team like Florida, who's decent in the SEC, and gets throttled, it's the way you beat that team and the way that team goes out and plays other teams.
Yep.
So if State goes and plays an SEC team and loses 41-10, they're going to say, well, where does that make Notre Dame stack up there? So Notre Dame really not playing the conference schedule, but having decent teams, they're never going to be looked at like the SEC teams. Because it's always going to be, Alabama beat Vanderbilt 65-0, right? So Notre Dame has to be the team that blows other teams out, and to get off the snide and go into overtime with Florida State after blowing an 18-point lead doesn't look good for their rankings. And I wouldn't be surprised if they even though they won, if they slid a little bit just based on their performance.
But is that really fair to them because they're not in the SEC? They're not in a power conference. I would say, quote unquote, power conference. Is that really fair to them? Because I'm a Notre Dame fan, but I also know that they barely squeaked by last night and they shouldn't be ranked where they're at. Is that really fair to them? With the rankings and where they're going to stand probably after this week.
You can only play your schedule, right? So I get that. You can only play who's in front of you on your schedule. But also what Notre Dame has for them, too, is they've got the NBC contract. They bring eyes, right? So It's always going to be, if Notre Dame is 8-5 or 6-6, they're always going to make a bowl game. And they're probably going to make a better bowl game than what they deserve, but they travel well. I mean, They are up there in the fan base and the ratings with Alabama, with even Texas, with even a USC or a Michigan. So I think it's unfair where Notre Dame stands as far as having to blow everybody out, but it just seems like they are always going to be compared to the big guys in the SEC.
It's similar as what's been going on with Clemson the last few years. For Clemson to get in that that Final Four talk, they've had to beat everybody by 27, 31 points, or they're not going to get looked at. And that's what Dabo Swinney had been saying for many years now is we can only play what's on our schedule, like you reiterated earlier. And the reason for that is that's the conference they play in. Now it's how you beat those teams again that's gonna set you apart. Just like the Alabamas are just gonna Alabama, Georgia, they're gonna meet in the SEC championship. They're gonna run roughshod over their conferences. And I don't see anybody that can stop either one of those teams.
Yeah, and I think a team like Clemson, where they've really been one of very few schools that have been able to compete year out with the Alabamas, with some of these schools. I mean, they're doing things that Miami has tried to do for years, Florida State's tried to do for years, Texas, and they've been able to do it. But again, there's also that fine line of okay, I'm Dabo Swinney, Clemson's playing Virginia. Virginia's not very good. Do we beat them 55-7 and never take our foot off the throttle, or do we beat them 38-14 and people say, "Oh, it's a little bit closer than what it should have been"? And it's a rock and a hard place for a lot of those schools.
Yeah, and it's kind of given Dabo a real, a bad name amongst some of the other ACC coaches. But they've got to understand he's trying to compete for a national title, and the only way to do that is handily just run roughshod over these other teams, and it's kind of the ugly part of college football right now.
Well, because I mean, you if you blow out another team, it's like, oh, why did you run up the score on them? And then if you don't run up the score, it's like, why did you only beat them by 7? So yeah, I mean that's probably what's going on.
It's just a ranking system and what comes with it.
Yeah.
What do you think about Jack Cohen, Notre Dame's quarterback? Is he the real deal? Is he somebody that Notre Dame can lean on?
No.
Based off last night, I would say that we could see some questions here over the next couple of weeks. I thought he made some good throws last night. I thought he got it to his playmakers when needed. But man, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm very comfortable with putting him in the trenches. But again, I still give him a little bit of leniency because it's only week 1.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's how everyone thinks. Everyone is saying, oh, God, we want him to be the guy, but he's not. He's not quite the guy yet.
But he also had to play against a rowdy crowd that was honoring Bobby Bowden. That was a rocking crowd. They were juiced up for that game. Maybe give him another week and see what happens against a team, like Toledo coming in and see what happens there.
Hey, another guy from New Palace playing for Toledo next on the hook.
Yep.
But yeah, I feel like if Notre Dame gets some solid wins under their belt, maybe people will forget the Florida State game. I mean, they won, but it was a very, more than close victory. I mean, it was, overtime, and they shouldn't have won by the margin they won, and that's what's gonna be glaring in the people that give the votes for, the standings.
And I think it'll be something that we find out over the next couple of weeks. If Florida State goes on a tear, and that's their only blemish, on their schedule is that Notre Dame overtime win. Maybe you look back and say, okay, that was a little bit closer because Florida State's a little bit better than what everybody thought. Okay. Now, if they lose to a Wake Forest or drop one in Syracuse or go to North Carolina, who's ranked and get throttled, then you're thinking, all right, let's go back and look at Notre Dame and why that game went the way it did. So, we'll just see how it goes over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Where SEC is probably going to be that number one, conference. What other conferences do you see, that are going to be that can compete with the SEC? The Big 10, the Big 12.
Yeah.
Nobody.
I wasn't impressed with Spencer Rattler in Oklahoma.
No.
Their performance playing. Tulane, a good team. You would say the Big 12 right now because they've got Iowa State and Oklahoma, but I think Iowa State is a little bit rated, a little bit overranked. The Pac-12, nobody there scares you. It surely isn't Oregon, and it surely isn't USC.
Yeah.
The Big 10, their best weapon is Ohio State, and then there's a massive drop-off to get to Penn State or Wisconsin. So I honestly think it's the SEC, and then it's a major fall-off before you get to, another level of who's next. I think that it's a huge gap between them, and I guess you could probably say the Big 10.
Do you see Spencer Rattler as being I wouldn't say number one pick, but do you see him being a first round draft pick?
Based on what I saw last year and this past weekend, I'd say no.
Why does he get so much? Why does he get so much hype then?
I just think that there has been this level of maybe, and to me, it's like Oklahoma's always overrated, right? Like, we've seen Oklahoma go to the national championship once or twice and get absolutely blown out.
Mm-hmm.
It always seems like they're playing down to their competition. When was the quarterbacks that they've had in the past were good, but they always either transferred out or had transferred in. They didn't go there originally. Baker Mayfield, those type of guys. I just feel like there's always a level of overrated for Oklahoma, and that's why it's hard for a lot of people on a national scale to take them seriously because half their schedule is Kansas State.
Right.
They take on Oklahoma State, who hasn't been good in a long time. I think it cuts the Big 12 is down as a whole.
Yeah,
I have to agree.
Yeah, because you see how many Oklahoma quarterbacks have been drafted in the first round in the past 10, 15 years?
Quite a few,
and they've all just been, I wouldn't say all bust, but they've pretty much been bust for the most part. You look at Bradford.
Baker still has time to show.
I think Baker will still he's got time, but
Kyler Murray's one that kind of stands out. That's been that kind of diamond in the rough. He's got an opportunity to have a really, really good season this year. They got him some weapons. They got him a better offensive line. He's got somebody helping him out. Cliff Kingsbury's doing a great job out there, I think. And I think that it's a team that could make some noise come the NFC.
Well, and I mean, what people also forget too is a guy like Tua Tagovailoa who was there and
Yes.
transferred back, from Alabama. So I mean, they're putting it out there, but I don't think Spencer Rattler's in that realm of those guys yet. Now, could he be by the end of the year? Yeah, it's possible, but I think right now I'm not sure he's a guy that you go get with the number 1 overall pick or even a top 10 pick.
Yeah, and that's what I'm like. We haven't talked about Ball State yet. Ball State won. I mean, let's give it to them. I mean, I know it was not against a ranked team or even a closely ranked team. How do you see Ball State's team doing this year?
Yeah, I mean, Coach knew that should be a quarterback-driven organization right now. We know what he did with the Saints. Ball State's one of those teams where it just seems like every year it's back and forth. You've got 1 week they're playing well and they're beating up on, let's say, a Toledo or Ohio, teams that are going to go to bowl games, and then the next week they're falling or struggling to a Bowling Green who's not very good.
Right.
So, I think if you're Ball State, you just want to make a bowl game, stay consistent, and continue to get better week in and week out.
Do you think Ball State could actually make a bowl game? Like, not the quick trip, whatever bowl game. Do you think they could make an actual solid bowl game?
I think that they're obviously handcuffed by their own conference.
Yeah. The MAC sucks.
This weekend and win, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, wait a minute. Now we got to take them seriously. But you got two tough road matchups coming up for the next 2 weeks with Penn State and Wyoming. You got to win one of those for sure. Set yourself up for 2-1 going into conference play. You get some of the better teams in the conference at home. You get Toledo at home, and Buffalo at home, who seems to always be like the top of the line, type MAC team. So if you can take care of business at home, I don't know what's a big bowl compared that they could make besides the Quick Lane Bowl.
Yeah, right.
Maybe they send them to the famous Idaho Potato Bowl or something along. But I mean, it is what it is, and it's a bowl game.
I mean, it sucks because they are a smaller school. They're not going to get the national recognition. I want to move on to God. Did you watch the Wisconsin Penn State game yesterday? Was that the most boring game you've ever watched in your life?
Yeah, it was kind of like watching myself run around on a Saturday night that first half. Just not a lot of scoring.
I like how you zing yourself there. Nice job.
I said Tua at Oklahoma. I meant Jalen Hurts.
You're fine. I know what you meant. But Tua went to Alabama. We get it. But that game, because I started my day. I was like, all right, Wisconsin Penn State. This is gonna be a great game, and it just it fell flat so badly.
It was definitely maybe a little bit overhyped. It was definitely one of those games where, I'm all about a defensive battle, but, let's say that game was in November. I think we'd have a little bit different look on it, if it was snowing, if it was cold. But that certainly wasn't the case for Camp Randall. And just ugly. And then they all of a sudden scored in bunches there late, and Wisconsin had that chance late through the interception. So I'm all about a defensive battle, but I don't want it Labor Day weekend. I'll take that defensive battle around things.
Which team looked worse, honestly? Because they're both defensive minded. Did Penn State or Wisconsin look worse for those first 3 quarters or whatever it was?
I thought Wisconsin. You got the home field advantage kind of going behind you.
You have the jump around going. I mean,
people are excited. People are back in the building, and they couldn't get anything going on those first couple of drives. You go to halftime 0-0, and you're probably thinking to yourself, all right, well, the defense is obviously keeping us in this, but having Graham Mertz throw 2 interceptions and only for 185 yards, I mean, that's tough. I mean, I just thought Penn State's offense struggled as well, but they at least got the passing game going as to where Wisconsin got the rushing game going. I mean, it was just it was just a battle of bull suckage. But
Yeah.
When Penn State got that first long touchdown, you at least thought, okay, they're opening it up, they're going deep. It's a 50-yard touchdown pass. They're at least trying something different. Then I just thought Wisconsin was playing to not lose the rest of that game.
That's what I thought.
What do you think about the Georgia Clemson game? For me, that was the most boring game of the weekend for me. I actually watched the majority of that game, and it was almost like watching paint dry. It was two juggernaut defenses. I get that. But both of those teams have got to be able to score points.
Well, I think we're used to seeing Georgia, or we're seeing Clemson, and we're used to seeing points. I mean, we forget that Georgia's had some really good quarterbacks over the last couple of years. Obviously, Clemson has had electric quarterbacks, number one type picks over the last couple of years. It's kind of like going to a baseball game. You want to see a one-run game, but would you rather see a 3-2 game, or would you rather see a 10-9 one-run game? It's going to be close. Let's be a shootout. I'd rather see more offense and defense. Maybe that's the way it goes this year. Georgia's a really tough team. I think Georgia is probably the only team in the SEC that's going to give Alabama fits. And I think Clemson's just not as good as what they have been, as we know. I mean, you lose the number one overall pick. That's going to happen. But we'll see. We'll see if they continue to slide or if they get their act together, because it's so hard to retool and quote unquote rebuild right away. And I think the expectations have and always will be teams like Clemson should be like Alabama, where every year they're good at contending. But the bottom line is like Alabama, that's the exception to the rule. Like, they are always going to be there. Pretty easy schedule the rest of the way for Clemson. They're not going to face anybody ranked unless, like I said, Florida State gets hot, or a team like Louisville gets hot, which I don't see happening. They're 9-point dogs tonight against Ole Miss. So Clemson could literally run the table the rest of the year, but I don't think that shows how good that they are going to be. I think that they are slightly overrated. I can see them taking another loss to a team, maybe going to Pitt would be one, maybe North Carolina State, or that last game of the year against South Carolina.
Yeah, I have to agree.
Yeah.
Do you see Georgia, especially their defense? They're somebody that can withstand the juggernaut of Alabama on offense. I see them as that one team
It
that
ain't gonna happen. It
that
ain't
can
gonna
stand
happen.
up to them. I don't know if they can beat Alabama, but their defense is elite. They absolutely, in my opinion, have the best defense in the nation, and I don't think it's even close.
No, I think you're right, and they're not going to get Bama until that SEC championship game, and that's going to be a number 1 versus number 3, or a number 1 versus number 2, and Chick-fil-A is going to be all over that shit. But, you look at Georgia's schedule, man. Like, they're going to have one test, and that's at home against Florida. Auburn, not as good as what they have been. Arkansas, they're okay. They can put points up on the board.
They're not going to beat them, though. No, obviously not.
Tennessee's not going to beat them. They're not going to go to Georgia Tech and lose. So I think we could probably make that prediction right now that the SEC championship game will be number 1 Alabama versus number 2 Georgia.
Does it piss you off that that the national championship game is probably going to be an SEC team versus an SEC team? I mean, is there any way they can mix it up to where there's because it's going to be all SEC unless a team comes out of nowhere and gets up there in the rankings. I mean,
hard for out of nowhere in football. You know what I mean? Like basketball, you can get upset any day.
Yeah.
Smaller school can get hot, make shots, right? When it comes to football, the athletic level that Alabama's at, like we're talking,
they're NFL level. They're NFL level as far as college football teams go. They could be in the NFL.
Yeah,
close.
And it's just tough for unless a team like Georgia, who has that good defense, and they kind of look ahead on their schedule and say, all right, we know we're going to get Bama. Here's what we got to do. And they can just I just feel football is knocking the quarterback off of their rhythm. And, I did a high school football game on Friday night, right? Broadcasted a high school game. And it's almost any football game, but you got to be able to execute. You got to be able to get off the field on third down. On offense, you got to be able to convert or get yards on first and second down. Alabama is a team that we see, against Miami the other day, there wasn't a lot of third and longs. There wasn't a lot of third and 15s off penalties. It was second and 4. But it was 3rd and 2.
Yeah.
And that's, that's coaching and getting these guys in the right situation by play calling on first down and being able to control that line of scrimmage. And Alabama can just control you from all different directions.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of Friday night, what happened in that game that somebody got ejected? I was at the Indians game, and I saw that you posted on Twitter that somebody got ejected. What actually happened? I didn't get to actually watch that.
So this is the first time it's ever happened to me. So I was doing Traders Point Christian, and if you haven't been up there out of Indianapolis, Whitestown, they're so rich up there, they had a freaking fireworks show
nice.
At halftime, right? So they're playing a team, South Newton, which is up off Highway 41 in Kentland, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
South Newton won in week 2 of high school football this year, and that was the first time they had won 37 straight games. So they're 1 for the last 37 coming in, and that win, it was the first win since 2015. It was 24-6, but this happened in the second quarter. There was a holding call, right? And the refs were really cool. We talked to the refs earlier in the night. There was a holding call that obviously South Newton did not agree with. There was some jawing back and forth, and next thing you know, there was a motion, that he's tossed. He's out of here. And I was like, you don't see that often. Now, from the booth, we couldn't tell if it was a fan or if it was a coach because nobody was really walking away. Nobody walked towards where the buses were in the parking lot. I saw one fan walking, and I was like, well, maybe that's who it was. We'll see if he comes back. So at halftime, I went down to the ref, and I said, hey, what happened? What was that exchange? And he said, well, he didn't like the holding call, so he was yelling. We gave him some leniency, hey, let's back it up here. Let's look in a different direction. We'll go from there. That wasn't enough. And then he said, I'll remember this when it comes to voting. So I'm assuming that to me, it was I think every high school coach gets to vote on the referees and tally system, or hey, you guys got graded an A+ in week 1, then an average grade. So the ref didn't like that and told him to hit the showers, and it ended up being an assistant coach. So
good Lord.
You don't see that often. I've never called something along those lines. And maybe it'll happen again, maybe it won't. But I was kind of stunned when I saw the old ejection sign.
Yeah, man. I was at the Indians game, and I couldn't actually listen to the audio, but you seemed so hyped about it. I was like, what the hell happened? I forgot about it afterwards, but I wanted to ask you about it because, man, high school sports, they're crazier than college, professional. They take it very serious. I get it, but they're very serious about it, and they'll go to any lengths to either win, to win or to do whatever. It's pretty insane.
I've called anywhere from a 1A game to a 6A game. It does get intense. You usually don't see ejections because it's also just a bad example to set for kids.
Yeah.
But when you deserve it and it's worthy of the ejection, it happens. So, man, we'll see if that happens again. It's that's probably the second craziest broadcast moment I had at a high school football game. I'll tell you the story real quick.
I was gonna say, what was the first? We need to hear it.
Yeah, so the first story was, I believe it was Chittard was playing somebody in the state championship game, right? So we're talking the last game of the year. These guys were in 2-a-days, whatever. And I'm on a sideline, and I think Mark James, the voice of IndyCar, was our play-by-play, and Lance Scheib was our color guy, if not mistaken. Anyway, so the kid gets cracked, hit pretty hard. He's on the ground, and they say, he's right. He's literally five yards in front of me. I'm on the sideline. So let's go down to Tony Donahue. He might have an injury report. Tony, what'd you see? And this kid just starts vomiting out of his face mask.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, God.
Projectile. And I'm like, well, he is clearly must be a stomach issue because he is throwing up all over the 30-yard line. if anything else comes, we'll let you know. And
God.
they ran down and just a bunch of Gatorade water bottles.
Yeah.
That AstroTurf to try to clean it up, and it was terribly disgusting. So hopefully I didn't ruin anybody's appetite there.
Oh my God, that's not, it's not hilarious, but it's just it's crazy. So, anyways, hey man, I really appreciate you being on tonight. I know it's a holiday, you got things going on. Really appreciate you being on, man.
Tony, it's always a pleasure talking to you, man. You're always giving great insight. We enjoy having you.
Thank you. Anytime. And we'll have to do a little Colts something coming up with the start of the season.
Well, after week 1, I'm going to be texting you and asking you your thoughts on week 1. I love talking shit to you. I love having you on here. And have a good night, buddy.
You guys too. Enjoy your Labor Day.
Thanks, buddy.
Man. Take it easy, man. And that was Tony Donahue. So, good podcast,
Dude,
man.
He's always fun to talk to.
Nice.
He's a genuine class act. He's a great guy. Very insightful. Very intelligent when it comes to any sports indie. And he's one guy that I always look forward to having. Yeah,
Tony's good. He's one of the guys. He'll talk shit. He'll talk whatever. But I mean, as far as a podcast goes, I mean, can you do much better than him? I mean, we've had Bob Kravitz on, we've had a bunch of guys on, but Tony, I will say this about Tony: he's always there whenever I ask him. I'll text him, be like, "Hey, Tony, you gonna join?" He'll be like, "Sure, man. When do you want me?" So I love that about Tony.
Hats off to him.
Yep, he did a great job tonight, and stay tuned.
Thanks, guys.